People are pissed. Michael Burry is back at it again, and people are super pissed because now Michael Burry is literally attacking everybody's favorite play of the last 3 years. And that is artificial intelligence and chips. Michael Burry straight up suggesting that Oracle, Meta, and companies like this, such as Google, Microsoft, Amazon, may all be totally overstating their revenues, borderline defrauding their investors. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly how Michael Burry could be 100% right, but how he's 100% wrong today. And the best way to make this analogy is by talking about my pee-pee. Yeah, I really apologize that we have to do this, but honestly, we've explained this on the channel before, and most people just don't understand this, or they didn't watch this, and that's okay. I'm gonna assume you will understand and that you didn't watch this explanation yet, but we're gonna use a very easy explanation because honestly, this is a real example, and it is the best example you could use to explain what the hell Michael Burry is saying, and it's very simple, okay? So here's how it works. Let's say you buy a plane for $13 million and you assume that that plane is going to last you for 13 years. The plane in this example is totally indistinguishable from a chip. So imagine this is a Blackwell chip. It's just easier to imagine it as a plane. So it's kind of like a car, right? Like imagine you buy a car and it's kind of like, I'm gonna assume the wheels are gonna start falling off by like year 9 or 10 or maybe 15 or whatever. I mean, hopefully 15 if we get those 15-year car loans. You will own nothing and be happy. But anyway, so depreciate this plane over 13 years. How does that work? If a plane is going to last 13 years, or we think it's going to last 13 years, and that's reasonable, then accountants will agree with you. It's not fraud. Accountants will agree with you and say, okay, we're gonna write it off over $1 million per year. That way it doesn't look like you're like massively negative 1 year. It just sort of butters out the expense. That's all it does. That's why a company like Meta isn't gonna 100% write off their chips right now, because their earnings would absolutely tank. And people will be like, oh, what the hell happened here? It'd be crazy. You're not gonna see that. The problem is that these chips have not actually gone down in value, and neither have current chips. They usually do, right? Like here, you have Google Tensor Processing Unit demand is outstripping supply, claims 8-year hardware iterations, and have 100% utilization. So in other words, runtime of 8-year-old chips is at 100%. Okay. So if runtime for 8-year-old chips is 100%, that means they probably haven't lost value. They certainly haven't gone to zero, right? So they've had more value than we thought they would. It's kind of like you go in thinking, I think this car is gonna last me 8 years, but then you end up driving it for 13 and you're like, wow, I can't believe that thing keeps kicking. This is fantastic, right? Okay, so now I want you to think about the plane example because this is huge. This aircraft, and this is a real example, has not actually gone down in value at all. In fact, when I sold the plane after 3 years of flying it and putting on over 800 hours onto the airframe, I sold the plane itself for a profit. Now, obviously, that's different from operating costs, fuel, pilots, insurance, just the actual plane. The chip, I sold the chip for a profit. This would be like buying an NVIDIA chip 3 years ago and selling it for a profit today, okay? Like, ordinarily, we think that's crazy. Like planes go down in value, cars go down in value, chips go down in value over time because we make new ones, we make better ones. So it should go down in value. Why did it go up in value? Okay. So this is exactly why Michael Burry is currently entirely wrong. We have way too much demand for chips and these particular aircraft, and we have too little supply. See, a company called Burry, whom I started investing in back when they were worth like $15. We talked about them in our course member live streams. We talked about them on the channel. Heck, I invested in them with different vehicles. A great company. There's so much freaking demand for these aircrafts that Burry stock has like quadrupled. And it makes sense because this aircraft is the best-selling business jet in the country. It became that, I believe in 2023, when NetJets honestly just they buy like every single one of them. They're waitlist for like years to get your hands on a brand new one of these. And if you buy a resale one, they sell for a premium. The exact same thing is true for chips. There is so much demand right now And supply is so constrained because we just don't have the manufacturing ability. We got plenty of designers. Amazon's a designer, Google's a designer, Nvidia's a designer, AMD's a designer. They're all designers. The problem is we don't actually have the manufacturing lines available to make all these chips. Same thing with planes, okay? There are plenty of plane designers. We just don't have that many manufacturing lines to actually produce as many planes as are required. So, in that case, if there is so much demand for an old chip and you're actually depreciating it, like in this example, $1 million per year, let's say, but then after 3 years, the value's actually gone down zero, what's actually happening is exactly the opposite of Michael Burry's argument. Meta and Oracle and Microsoft are actually overstating their expenses, which means they're actually understating their revenue because these chips have not lost value. The plane didn't lose value. So if you're writing it off, any dollar you're writing it off means you're overstating your expenses. So you could actually make the argument today that Michael Burry is entirely wrong, that the opposite is true, that these chips, or that plane example, have actually gone up in value, or at least stayed stable, and therefore they shouldn't be writing off anything. Okay, how does this change? And this is what I want you to know. So if you've made it 6 minutes into this video, 3 minutes on 2X, this is why you want to subscribe to the channel. Because I want you to understand that you could be a bull on that fact right now. Okay, the bull is, yo, right now, they actually might be overstating their expenses. It literally takes Burry's argument, turns it on its head. Burry's literally going,
fetch me.
And he's like, bro, how is that possible? Why is that possible?
It's because that's why.
Right now, that is a fact. Companies are probably overstating their depreciation because we are still utilizing these old chips because supply is so low and demand is so high. So what does this rely on? Right. Let's go back to the plane example for a moment. What happens if, let's say, there's a recession and all of a sudden demand slows for private aviation? Or I don't know, the FAA comes in and says you're no longer allowed to fly private jets. Or I don't know, Greta Thunberg finally wins and people aren't allowed to have private jets. Well, all of a sudden, demand for these aircraft is going to plummet. And as soon as that demand falls below the level of supply that is able to be produced, the value of these aircraft will plummet. You'll actually see this massive normalization where all of a sudden when somebody buys an aircraft, wow, it actually goes down in value every year. It's odd for a car or a plane, like during COVID, cars went up in value, right? Weird, right? Used cars were skyrocketing. Weird, not normal. Demand really high, supply really low. Okay, everybody wanted a new car. When that demand falls off a cliff because of whatever, some legal risk or recession or whatever, then the value of these aircraft will plummet very, very quickly because why would you want an old one when you can get a new one? The same is true of chips. And then companies might actually have to go, oh man, you know, we were able to use a 6 or 8 year depreciation schedule on these chips because old chips were still being utilized at 100%. So it was okay to change our accounting method. This is Burry's argument here. You know, instead of depreciating these over 3 years or 4 years, we'll go to 6 or 7 years or whatever. Oh, 6, 7. That will change if demand falls off a cliff for these and supply, or it could be a combination, supply skyrockets. Okay. Then companies will look and go, crap. If, let's say, for some reason this plane or chip depreciates much more rapidly, then we're going to have to go back and we'll have to restate our financials and we'll actually have to write off more expenses more rapidly, and it'll actually look like in that case we have overstated our earnings. Aha! That is where Michael Burry's argument comes in. Michael Burry says, by 2028, Oracle will overstate its revenues by 26.9%, Meta by 20%, etc. But it gets worse, more detail coming November 25th. Now, this is where you have to see, to understand this Burry argument, you have to understand that it is entirely possible for Burry to be wrong right now. And it actually looks like he's wrong right now. Just like if you said a plane should go down in value, you would be wrong right now. The same is true, though, in the future, that we should normalize. Old chips should be worthless. Planes should go down in value over time. So it is possible that Michael Burry will be exactly correct. The only way that he will be exactly correct, though, is that for some reason, like let's say there's a market crash, companies start getting punished for massive CapEx, and all of a sudden companies say, you know what, we're just not going to buy anymore. I mean, remember what the next phase is that we're seeing in artificial intelligence. We're literally seeing Microsoft start advertising Copilot on X or on Facebook. They're using influencers to promote Copilot, which I think Copilot's the worst, but whatever. Everybody has their own opinion on these. I'm not trying to offend anyone. Like, I was a GPT disciple, and then all of a sudden I discovered Gemini. I usually use multiple at the same time, but I discovered the latest progress that Gemini has made, and I'm like, I personally think they're leading right now. But who knows? Like tomorrow, there could be a Copilot update, and maybe it's better. And I recognize they use a lot of GPT as their backbone. But point is, like, things change. And so Michael Burry is stating something that right now makes him look like a fool. And this is why he's getting a lot of hate. The reason for the call today, John, is depreciation. And you get your tunnel vision on the depreciation bomb. Burry getting margin called on the short. I'm sure the big four accounting firms totally overlooked that one. Classic hammer syndrome. When you got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. This guy right here, 100% used GPT. I mean, who says this? I get it. I once hit big on an arbitrage and started seeing arb everywhere. But you don't step in the same river twice. What? Dude, the guy's totally using GPT to write his tweets, whatever. And then you got somebody here who's clearly not using GPT. Just say you're bagged. It's like, dude, the internet is just freaking hilarious. I can't reply to any of these tweets here because if you're blocked by Michael Burry, which I am, you can't reply to any of the underlying, which I think is so funny that Michael Burry has me blocked. But it's because, in my opinion, I provide a reasonable counter argument to his arguments. That's not actually why I got blocked, to be fair. I got blocked because I left an eggplant emoji as a comment to one of his posts. Been blocked ever since. That said, look, I think the perspective here is really, really important. And I think the plane analogy is really great because, like, at some point, within the next decade, it seems reasonable to me, especially if there's a recession, that plane values will plummet. It doesn't make sense that you could put 800 hours on a plane and sell it for more. Like, that sounds crazy. And it's exactly what happened. But again, that's because supply is so constrained and demand is so high for these aircraft. That will change. Whether it's a recession, supply catching up, a combination of those, some form of normalization, that will change, and you're gonna have to do a lot of catch-up depreciating on some of these assets. So this is why Burry could be right in the future, but he's dead wrong right now. And so I think knowing that is useful because now you can identify that inflection point. When you start seeing that change happening, supply coming up, demand starting to taper down, that's your early warning sign. And again, that's why you want to make it to the end of my videos. So if you found that helpful, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one. I appreciate y'all.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.